I kept the record. That was my function in the conclave's hall. A seconded scribe from the Ardenvith Compact, neutral by treaty, present by obligation, invisible by design. I sat in the lower tier with my transcription board and my stylus, and I noted everything. Every motion tabled, every vote called, every procedural murmur from the presiding voices at the high days. The Theocratic Conclave of the Sovan Ascendancy did not trust machines with their holy deliberations, so they employed clerks from neutral bodies and made us sign oaths of silence that had real legal teeth. I had served 3 sessions without incident. The session that ended my career in that chamber began at the 6th bell and was intended to last no more than 2 hours. The human delegation had been seated since the 5th. 3 of them at the low table reserved for petitioning parties, below the dais, below the tiered seating of the voices, below even the observers. The table's position was deliberate. Every petitioner sat there. It was meant to communicate a spatial theology. You come to us, you look up, you understand your position in the order of things. The senior delegate was a man named Voss. I had seen him at 2 prior sessions. He was not young, and he was not trying to appear young, gray-haired, square-shouldered, the kind of stillness in a man that comes from having waited in worse rooms than this. He carried a single document case, worn at the corners. His 2 aides sat flanking him, and they did not speak, and neither did he. They had been waiting 40 minutes when the conclave came to order. The presiding voice, First Cantor Selverath, held the seat for 11 years, and who had the voice of a man who had never once been told he was wrong, opened without preamble. He announced that the conclave had completed its private review of the human petition for transit rights through the Sovan corridor, and had reached its conclusion by unanimous acclamation. Voss did not react. He placed his hands flat on the table. Selverath announced the conclusion. The petition was denied. Further, the conclave had determined that the continued human presence at the corridor's outer waypoints constituted an encroachment upon sacred Sovan space, and the conclave was issuing a formal writ of interdiction, requiring all human vessels to withdraw behind the Envoy boundary within 30 days or face confiscation. Still Voss did not react. I noted it all. My stylus moved. I did not look up. Then Selverath did the thing that I have spent years trying to understand, and have never been able to set down to anything, except arrogance made theological. He announced that in keeping with Sovan law regarding the conduct of petitioners who had been found to have submitted a petition in bad faith, and the conclave had made this determination privately, without informing the human delegation or specifying the evidence, the senior petitioner was subject to right of censure. I did not know what right of censure meant. I learned it in the next 4 minutes. 2 sanctioned wardens descended from the flanking alcoves. They were large, as Sovan males tend to be in a ceremonial role, and they wore the white and copper ceremonial plate of the conclave's enforcement order. They took Voss by the arms. He did not resist. His 2 aides rose halfway from their chairs, and then stopped. Stopped because Voss looked at them once, and what he communicated in that look I could not transcribe. But they sat back down. The right of censure, I discovered, was a public marking. They branded his right hand. A small iron, heated, bearing the conclave's interdiction glyph, pressed for 3 seconds. It was done efficiently. Voss made no sound. He looked at the first cantor throughout. When the wardens released him, Voss stood still for a moment. His 2 aides were on their feet now, silent, watching him. He looked at his hand. He looked at it the way you look at a bill that has just come due, not with surprise, but with the quiet arithmetic of a man who knows exactly what column it goes in. Then he looked at Selverath. "Told you what would follow," he said. "We meant it." He closed his document case. He walked out. His aides followed. The chamber doors were old carved stone and very heavy, swung shut behind them with a sound like a period at the end of a sentence. The chamber was not silent exactly. There were murmurs, but I noticed that none of the murmurs were coming from the high dais. Presiding voices were absolutely still, and some of them were doing, Sovan, the thing Folvan elders do when they are recalculating. That slight downward tilt of the head, the upper lids lowering, the long pause before they will trust themselves to speak. Selverath broke it. He announced that the session was concluded and that the conclave would reconvene at the 3rd bell of the following day to address the formal Implementation of the writ of interdiction. I noted this. I packed my board. I left. I want to be precise about what I did not know at this point, because the subsequent inquiry spent considerable time suggesting I should have understood the implications. I did not know the specific terms of the prior diplomatic exchange between the Human Expeditionary Corps and the Conclave. I did not know that 2 full sessions ago, before the petition was even formally lodged, a human legal attaché had submitted a sealed document to the Conclave's archive department, a document whose contents the voices had apparently dismissed without full reading. I did not know that Voss had stated the same sentence, with minor variations, in 3 separate preliminary meetings over the preceding months, and that it had been logged each time as ritual diplomatic boilerplate. We told you what would follow. We meant it. I did not know any of this. I knew only what I had transcribed. And what I had transcribed was a man who had his hand branded in a holy chamber, and said 7 words and walked out. I returned to my quarters in the Compact's annex and began the evening transcription. I was 3 pages into the formal record when the first tremor went through the building. Not dramatic. A shudder, the kind that makes you look up from your work and then decide it was nothing. The second one, an hour later, was longer. I checked the Conclave's public alert system. It showed nothing. I checked the Compact's internal feed. That showed 2 outer waypoint stations in the Sovan corridor, reporting communication blackouts. I went to bed, because I was a clerk and this was not my department. The 3rd bell came and the Conclave did not reconvene. By the time the sun was fully up, the count was 7 Sovan installations in the corridor that had gone dark. Not destroyed, I would learn later, taken offline with a precision that the Sovan's own tactical corps would spend the next 18 months reverse engineering and never fully replicate. Each one had been issued the same notification 40 seconds before it went dark. A simple record, the human diplomatic communication from 2 sessions prior, the one that had been dismissed as boilerplate, forwarded back to them with 1 line appended at the bottom in Sovan formal script. We said what we would do. Here is what we did. The Conclave's emergency session that morning was the first I was ever asked to leave. A sanctioned warden came to my gallery seat and told me, genuine apology, that the proceedings were being held under sacred seal. I gathered my board and walked out, and as I descended the outer steps into the pale morning light, I passed a courier running in the opposite direction, as I saw enough of the document in his hand to read the header. It was a formal request for communication, addressed to the Human Expeditionary Corps, marked urgent. I sat on the steps for a while. The city around the Conclave's hill was quiet in the way that a city gets quiet when the people in it have begun to understand something they would rather not. I thought about Voss, about the way he had looked at his hand, about the 7 words in the closed document case and the stone door swinging shut. I have been asked, in the years since, whether I felt he was right to do what he did, or whether the Conclave was right to do what it did. These are questions for theologians and diplomats, and I am neither. I am a clerk. I note what happens and I keep the record straight. What I can tell you is what I noted, in the margin of my own private transcript that morning on the steps. They told them 3 times, over 6 months in formal language, on the official record. The Conclave dismissed it as ceremony. Turns out it wasn't ceremony. Turns out when a man tells you what will follow and then you brand his hand in a holy room, the thing that follows is the thing he said would follow, delivered to the minute, and there is nothing ceremonial about it at all. I filed my resignation from the secondment that afternoon. I kept the transcript. I have never shown it to anyone who wasn't cleared to see it, and I have never needed to. The record speaks for itself. It always did.